I lost everything in a single phone call. Not my dignity, that would come later, but my entire fortune vanished the moment I heard those words. Your assets have been frozen. Effective immediately. I remember the hum of the air conditioning in my penthouse. I remember the smell of the imported cedarwood panels I'd had installed in my home office. I remember staring at the glass of 20-year-old scotch on my desk, watching a bead of condensation drip slowly down the side, like it was trying to escape. And then, nothing. Just silence. The kind that fills your chest until you can't breathe. My name is Daniel Ross. I used to be someone people returned calls for. A startup mogul, a featured speaker at tech summits, a man whose name opened doors and whose signature signed futures. I was 34, rich beyond reason, and sure I had built something that couldn't be touched. But nothing is untouchable. It started with a legal investigation into one of my companies. I wasn't even directly involved. A compliance officer allegedly faked documents to meet regulatory deadlines. That's all it took. The Department of Justice froze every account tied to me or my business holdings. My lawyers assured me it was a precaution. Temporary. But when you can't access your money, your power shrinks fast. People smell it, the weakness. Within hours, the calls stopped coming. Partners postponed meetings. Investors went quiet. Even my so-called friends disappeared like smoke. I had just enough in one personal account, around $100. I hadn't even known it existed until my assistant texted. Looks like you've got $103.17 in that old Midtown debit. Hope that helps. Good luck, Daniel. She quit right after. The penthouse would be locked down within 48 hours. My name, my face, my empire, all of it was becoming toxic. Reporters circled like vultures. I didn't want to be seen. But I couldn't just sit in that silent, shrinking space. So I walked. I didn't have a plan, just a wallet with $100 bill, 2 crumpled singles, and a driver's license that suddenly felt like a lie. It was raining. The kind of light rain that feels like shame. It was June, but the sky felt November gray. I ducked into the first bar I saw. It was one of those places where time hangs like smoke in the air, dark wood, faded booths, and a jukebox that only played songs older than I was. The kind of bar where people go to forget their lives, or maybe remember them. I wasn't dressed for the scene, still in a tailored suit that cost more than most people's rent, though it felt ridiculous now. The bartender barely looked up. But someone else did. She was behind the bar, pouring a beer with practiced ease, her dark curls pulled back into a messy ponytail. A faded denim shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows. She glanced at me like she'd seen my kind before, probably had. But her eyes lingered a second longer than I expected. Curious, but not impressed. That was new. What'll it be? She asked. I sat at the far end of the bar, away from the regulars. Whatever's cheapest. She arched a brow but said nothing. A moment later, she slid a pint glass my way. $5. I peeled off one of the singles and the 100. She took it without blinking, handed back the change. I noticed the name tag on her chest, Aaron. I tried to sip slowly, but my hands were shaking. Everything was hitting me at once, not the money, but the weight of being nobody. I used to have a driver waiting outside any place I went. Now I was nursing a $5 beer in a bar that smelled like wet leather and old regrets. Aaron kept glancing my way. Eventually, she wandered over with a towel slung over her shoulder. You don't look like a guy who drinks the cheap stuff, she said. I almost laughed. You don't know the half of it. She smirked. Try me. And I don't know why I did, maybe because she looked like she wouldn't use it against me, but I told her. I didn't name names or mention companies. Just said I'd lost everything. That I was scared. That I didn't know who I was without the money, without the suits, the power. I always thought I'd be the last man standing, I said quietly. But it turns out I was never really standing at all. She leaned against the bar. You know what my dad used to say? The strongest tree isn't the one that never bends. It's the one that bends and doesn't break. That stuck with me. More than it should have. I ended up staying for hours. I nursed that beer like it was a lifeline. She kept the conversation going, light at first, then deeper. We talked about dreams we'd given up, people we missed, the version of ourselves we wished we could be. She told me about her brother, a musician who died too young, and how she'd left college to help her mom run a diner. Said she'd come to New York chasing something she still couldn't name. There was something about Erin. She wasn't trying to fix me or flatter me. She didn't care who I had been, only who I was in that moment. That night, for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like a ghost haunting the ruins of my life. When I finally stood to leave, I looked down at the change in my hand. I had just under $90 left. "See you tomorrow?" she asked. I hesitated. "You don't even know me." She shrugged. "Maybe not. But I know a man who hasn't given up yet when I see one." I walked out into the night with no plan, no home, and no idea what came next. But something had shifted. Maybe it was her. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was the last $100 reminding me that sometimes, rock bottom isn't the end. It's where the story really begins. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on a stiff motel mattress, staring at the ceiling fan spinning slow circles above me. The hum of it was the only sound in the room, except for the occasional siren in the distance. The kind of siren that used to sound like background noise in my life, now it sounded personal, like the world was closing in on me. The mattress springs creaked every time I moved. I'd paid $49.99 cash for the night, a special rate, the owner said, since it was off-peak. I didn't ask what that meant. I just handed him the money and tried not to think about the fact that nearly half of my last $100 was already gone. I kept replaying the conversation with Erin in my head. Her voice had an honesty I wasn't used to. Most people talked to me like I was a prize, or a threat. But she didn't treat me like a failed millionaire or a tragic headline. She treated me like a man with bruised edges. Someone real. And somehow, that terrified me more than going broke. The next afternoon, I walked back into the bar. Same denim shirt. Same ponytail. She looked up as the door creaked open and gave me a slow, knowing smile. "You came back," she said. "I told you I would." "No, you didn't," she replied, drying a glass. "But I'm glad you did." I sat in the same stool. The place was quieter during the day, just a couple of old-timers playing pool in the back and a woman eating peanuts at the counter. I reached into my wallet and pulled out another $5. She waved it off. "This one's on me." "I can't let you do that." "You can. And you will. Call it a trade." "For what?" She leaned in slightly. "You tell me one honest thing about yourself you haven't told anyone else." I blinked. No one had asked me that. Not really. Not when I had money. Back then, people only wanted the version of me they could benefit from. I took a slow sip. The beer was cold. Slightly bitter. Fitting. "Okay," I said finally. "Here's something. I haven't talked to my dad in almost 9 years. I sent him money every Christmas, every birthday. But I never called. Not once." She tilted her head. "Why?" I stared into my drink. Because I didn't want him to know that I still cared what he thought of me. He left when I was 10. I spent the next 20 years trying to prove I didn't need him. She didn't say anything for a while. Just nodded like she understood. Then she said, "You should call him." I almost laughed. "Why would I do that now?" "Because the moment you think it's too late," she said quietly, "is usually the moment it still matters most." I came back every day that week. The routine gave me something to hold on to. I'd wake up, walk the city, kill time at libraries and public benches. Then, around 3 in the afternoon, I'd head to the bar and sit in that same spot. Erin was always there. We'd talk, sometimes about heavy things, sometimes about nothing at all. She told me her favorite place in the world was a little cabin in the Catskills she used to visit with her brother. Said the best moments of her life were spent there, sitting by a lake with coffee and silence. I told her about my first company, the late nights, the first pitch, the moment I saw our name on the NASDAQ ticker. And then I told her how empty I felt afterward. Like I'd reached the summit and realized it was just a painted backdrop. Somehow, with Erin, I didn't feel the need to perform. She asked questions no one else ever asked me. What did success mean to me now? If I could start over, what would I build? Who would I be if I had no one to impress? One night, as I was walking her to the subway after closing, she said something that stuck. "You're not afraid of losing money," she said. "You're afraid that without it, you won't matter." I stopped in my tracks. She wasn't wrong. I'd spent years believing I was valuable because of what I created. What I earned. But what if I was wrong? What if I'd just been hiding behind the dollar signs? That weekend, I went back to the motel and took out a notebook from my duffel bag. It was leather-bound, a gift from an investor years ago. I hadn't used it once. Now I began scribbling. Not plans. Not business models. Just thoughts. What if I started something that had nothing to do with money? What if success wasn't being untouchable, but being known? What if being seen, truly seen, was the whole point? The questions spilled out faster than answers. But for once, I didn't need answers. I just needed truth. And Erin kept giving it to me, one conversation at a time. By Wednesday, I was down to $12.83. My motel tab was done. I didn't want to tell her, but she noticed the dark circles under my eyes. "Where are you staying?" she asked, handing me a glass of water instead of beer. I hesitated. "Nowhere. Not anymore." She wiped her hands on a bar towel. "I get off in 20 minutes. "What? You can crash at my place. Couch only. No weird stuff." I blinked. "You don't even know me." She looked at me, not with pity, but with something deeper. "I know enough." That night, I sat on a lumpy but clean couch in her studio apartment above a laundromat. The place was small, kitchen and bed in the same room, but warm. Books stacked in corners. A string of photos clipped across the window, her brother, her mom. All laughing. She made tea. I offered to help, but she waved me off. We sat on the floor, knees bent, shoulders touching the side of the couch. "You know," she said, "I think most people don't actually know what they want until they lose everything." I looked at her. "And what did you lose?" She sipped her tea. "Time. I stayed in places too long. With people who didn't see me. I gave away years because I was afraid to start over." I swallowed hard. Maybe that was what we had in common. We both gave pieces of ourselves to things that didn't deserve them. She looked at me for a long time. "You're going to be okay, Daniel. You sound pretty sure." "I am." I didn't ask why. Because deep down, I wanted to believe her. The couch creaked under me as I shifted, the early morning sun sneaking through the window blinds. I hadn't slept much. The scent of coffee drifted from the kitchen, and for a moment, I could almost pretend that life was normal, that I hadn't lost everything, that I wasn't technically homeless, jobless, and down to less than $10. Erin stood barefoot in her small kitchen, pouring coffee into mismatched mugs. She looked up and smiled, not the kind of smile you give out of politeness, but the kind that says you're still safe here. "Morning," she said, offering me a mug. "Thanks," I muttered, wrapping my hands around the warmth. "You snore," she added, grinning. I groaned. "Great. One more thing I've failed at." "No, I mean it's kind of comforting. Makes this place feel less empty." She said it like it was no big deal, but I caught the flicker in her eyes, the way she quickly turned toward the sink after speaking. She was used to being alone. Probably for a long time. I wasn't sure how to respond. I wasn't used to being let into people's quiet spaces, not without some kind of transaction or expectation. But Erin gave without keeping score. It was both foreign and disarming. "Listen," I said, "I appreciate you letting me crash here, but I'll figure something out. I don't want to be a burden." "You're not," she said quickly, then paused. "But if you want to help, you can fix the leaky faucet. It's been driving me nuts." I blinked. "You're kidding." She crossed her arms. "You said you built a tech empire. Surely you can handle a wrench." Fixing that faucet turned into an entire afternoon of chores, patching a loose cabinet door, unclogging a stubborn drain, even helping Erin reorganize her tiny pantry. She teased me the whole time, called me Mr. CEO like I was her intern. It felt ridiculous. And oddly, right. For the first time in years, I was doing something with my hands, something real. Not negotiating contracts or pitching to investors, just fixing, cleaning, helping. There was a satisfaction in it I hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe ever. As we worked, we talked. Not about the past this time, but the future. Not grand visions, just ideas. I used to want to open my own place, she said as we wiped down the counters. A bar. She shook her head. A cafe. With books and music and late-night poetry readings. Something warm and weird and full of life. I looked at her. Why didn't you? She shrugged. Life. Money. Fear. Pick your excuse. What if we did it? I heard myself say. She blinked. What? I hesitated. Not tomorrow. Not even this year. But what if we started something? Together. She studied me for a long time, searching my face. You don't even know if you'll get your money back. I'm not talking about that, I said. I'm talking about building something that matters. With someone who sees people, not profit. She didn't answer right away. But I saw the thought plant itself behind her eyes. That night, I sat alone in the apartment while she worked a late shift. I stared at my empty wallet and did something I hadn't done in weeks. I opened my laptop and typed a name into a search engine, James Ross. My father. There wasn't much. A retirement announcement from a small town in Oregon. A picture of him, older now, grayer, standing beside a woman I didn't recognize. I wondered if he still remembered me. I hovered over the phone, debating. Aaron's words echoed in my head. The moment you think it's too late is usually the moment it still matters most. But I didn't call. Not yet. Instead, I opened a blank document and began typing. Not a business pitch. Not a strategy. A story. Mine. The next day, Erin came home to find me still writing. You look intense, she said, setting down her bag. I think I might actually have something, I told her. Not just for us. For me. She sat beside me. Show me. I read it aloud, a rough outline for a series of essays, maybe even a book. About falling, failing, losing identity in success, and finding it again in the wreckage. About how worth isn't measured in net value, but in resilience. In connection. She listened quietly, nodding occasionally. When I finished, she was silent for a beat. You need to share this. No one wants a sob story from a guy who used to fly private jets. You're wrong, she said. People want honesty. They want to know they're not the only ones breaking apart inside. You can give them that. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that. Later that week, we found a rhythm. I spent my mornings writing, afternoons doing small gigs I found through local forums, handyman jobs, furniture assembly, tech help for older folks. It didn't pay much, but it paid. And every dollar felt earned in a way no stock option ever had. Erin kept showing up, too. More than that, she invited me to stay in her life. She printed out old recipes she wanted to use for her dream cafe. We made coffee together in the mornings like we were rehearsing for something real. She even asked me to teach her a few basics about business structure. Just in case, she'd say with a shrug. But I saw it in her, that spark. That belief creeping in like dawn. I don't know when it shifted from friendship to something more. Maybe it was the night we slow danced in the living room to a song playing on her scratched record player. Or the way she leaned her head on my shoulder during a thunderstorm and sighed like she was finally safe. I never said the words, not yet, but I knew I was falling for her. Not because she saved me. But because she reminded me that I was still worth saving. Then, one morning, I received an email. From my attorney. Subject line. Unfreezing order finalized. Assets to be released. My stomach flipped. Just like that, everything I'd lost was coming back. But instead of joy, I felt a strange panic. Because suddenly, I had to choose. The man I was, or the man I was becoming. When the email came, I read it 3 times before it truly sank in. My assets were being released. The money. The stocks. The accounts. Everything that had been frozen for weeks after a regulatory investigation, which, it turned out, had cleared me completely. No wrongdoing. Just bad timing, bad luck, and bureaucratic fear. And now, the gates were opening again. I sat at the tiny kitchen table in Erin's apartment, my laptop screen glowing, the rest of the room still dark from the early morning shadows. She was asleep on the couch behind me, her breathing steady. Soft. Familiar. The number in my account would, by tomorrow morning, be astronomical again. And yet, I'd never felt more uncertain. Because this wasn't just the return of money. It was the return of my old life. The meetings. The calls. The power. The pressure. The isolation dressed up as luxury. The man who'd lost everything had somehow found a version of himself he didn't hate. But would that version survive when the world came knocking again? Erin stirred as the sun crept in. I closed the laptop before she could see the screen. You're up early, she murmured, rubbing her eyes. I couldn't sleep. She sat up slowly, wrapping the blanket around her shoulders. Something wrong? I hesitated, then forced a smile. No. Just thinking. She watched me. Erin had that rare ability to read people beyond what they said, like she could see the vibrations beneath the surface. Want coffee? Yeah, I said. I'll make it. As I poured water into the kettle, I felt a lump rise in my throat. I should have told her. I wanted to tell her. But part of me was scared that the second I did, things would shift. That I'd become that guy again. That she'd look at me differently. That we'd lose what we had built, fragile and strange and beautiful as it was. Later that day, I walked to a nearby park to clear my head. My phone buzzed constantly, old contacts who had gone silent were suddenly reaching out again. My assistant, my banker, 2 journalists. Even my ex-fiancée. The one who had walked out 6 months ago when things started to fall apart. She hadn't called me once since the freeze. Now she wanted to meet. Glad to see things are back on track. Coffee soon. I stared at the message, thumb hovering over the keyboard. Then I locked the screen and shoved the phone in my pocket. Everything in me wanted to shut down. To run. But I couldn't. Not anymore. I went back to Erin's place that evening. She was reading on the floor, music playing low from her record player, an old jazz album that crackled like a fireplace. Hey, she said softly as I walked in. You okay? I sat beside her, legs crossed. I have to tell you something, I said. She set her book down. Okay. I took a breath. My money's coming back. Her face didn't change the way I expected. She didn't gasp or recoil or light up. She just nodded, slowly. All of it. Yeah. The investigation cleared. Assets are being released. By tomorrow morning, I'll be rich again. She looked down at her lap, then back at me. And how do you feel about that? That was the question, wasn't it? I feel like I don't know who I'm supposed to be now, I admitted. I thought I'd be thrilled. But I'm terrified. I don't want to go back to who I was. She touched my hand. Then don't. It's not that simple. That life, it's loud. Demanding. It doesn't leave room for anything real. I got sucked into it once, and I don't know if I'm strong enough to fight it off again. You're not the same man who walked into my bar with $10 and a chip on his shoulder, she said gently. You've changed. That doesn't disappear just because your bank account fills back up. I met her eyes. I don't want this to change us. Then don't let it. The next morning, the funds hit my account. $86 million. I stared at the number for a long time. It looked like fiction. But my hands were real. My breath. Erin sleeping in the next room. That was real. I closed the browser. No calls. No announcements. I made one purchase, 2 train tickets to the Catskills. She blinked when I handed her the envelope. What's this? You told me about the lake, I said. I want to see it. She stared at me, suspicious. You're not buying me off, are you? I laughed. No. I'm asking for time. Away from everything. To breathe. To figure out what this next chapter looks like. She grinned. You really are changing. The trip was quiet. Peaceful. We rented a small cabin with a wood stove and no Wi-Fi. She showed me where she used to sit as a teenager with a journal and a bag of sunflower seeds. We went hiking. Talked about nothing and everything. At night, we lay under blankets, a single lamp between us, and played records on a tiny portable speaker. I read her some of what I'd written, my essays, the beginnings of what might become a book. She cried once. Just a little. You should publish this, she whispered. People need to hear it. One morning, we stood at the edge of the lake, watching the sunrise break over the still water. I want to do it, I said. Do what? Start the cafe. With you. I'll invest. But not as a project. As a life. She turned slowly. Are you sure? Money gave me power. But it never gave me peace. This feels like peace. She smiled. And for the first time in years, I believed I was exactly where I was supposed to be. But just as the fog began to clear from my life, the past came knocking again. 3 days later, as we sat in a diner near the train station, I saw a man step inside and look around. He wore a dark coat, silver hair, familiar eyes. Aaron followed my gaze. Who is that? I stood up slowly, throat dry. That, I said, is my father. I hadn't seen my father in over 20 years. Not since the day he walked out of our house with a duffel bag and a promise he never kept. I'll come back for you, son. Just give me a little time. Time turned into years. Years turned into silence. But there he was now, older, slower, more fragile than I remembered. His face had aged in the ways mine hadn't yet. Same eyes though. Same quiet storm in them. He stepped into the diner, scanned the room, and his gaze landed on me. I stood frozen. My stomach flipped. My breath caught somewhere between shock and resentment. Is that, Aaron whispered beside me. I nodded, barely able to form the word. Yeah. He walked toward us, a hesitant smile forming. Not confident. Not sure he'd be welcomed. And to be honest, neither was I. Hey, kid, he said when he reached the table. His voice was rougher than I remembered, like a man who hadn't used it for anything soft in a long time. I'm not a kid anymore, I said. He swallowed. No. You're not. Aaron looked between us and, reading the moment perfectly, stood. I'll give you 2 minutes. She touched my shoulder gently before walking out, leaving us in the echo of old wounds. He sat across from me, hat in his hands. Fidgeting. Like a man who'd rehearsed this conversation 100 times but still didn't know how to start. I wasn't sure you'd come, I said. He exhaled slowly. I wasn't sure you'd want me to. You didn't exactly give me a reason to. He nodded, accepting it without defense. That surprised me. I heard what happened, he said finally. About your company. The freeze. Then, the release. You keeping tabs on me? Only from a distance, he admitted. Didn't want to make things worse. I looked away, out the window. The world outside was peaceful, too peaceful for what was raging inside me. Why now? I asked. Why show up now? He took a long breath. Because I saw your face on the news again. And I realized I didn't want to die without seeing my son one more time. There it was. The thing I didn't know I needed to hear, and hated hearing all the same. For a few minutes, we just sat there. 2 men who shared blood but not much else. The silence between us held years of unsaid things. He finally broke it. I made a lot of mistakes, he said. I left because I thought I'd be a burden. Your mom, she deserved better. And I thought maybe you'd grow up stronger without me dragging you down. I clenched my jaw. That's not how it works. I know that now. The diner around us buzzed with life, waitresses taking orders, coffee being poured, laughter from another booth. But in our bubble, it was just pain and apologies. You could have written. Called. Anything. I wanted to, he said. But every year that passed made it harder. I kept thinking, what if he hates me? I did, I said honestly. For a long time. He nodded, eyes shining. But I don't anymore, I added. I just don't know where to put you in my life now. That broke something in him. He looked down at his hands, rough, calloused, aged by hard labor or hard living. Maybe both. You don't have to, he said softly. I just needed to see you. And to say I'm proud of the men you've become. Even if I didn't help you get there. I couldn't speak for a moment. My throat was tight. My heart confused. It's a strange thing, forgiveness. You think it's about justice. About who was right and who was wrong. But when the moment comes, it feels more like letting go of a weight you didn't know you were carrying. I reached across the table, hesitated, then placed my hand on his. I don't know what happens next, I said. But I'm willing to find out. He nodded, blinking quickly. I'd like that. We spent the rest of the afternoon walking by the lake. Erin joined us eventually, intuitively giving us space and presence at the same time. She had a gift for that, being both near and invisible when needed. He told me about his life in Oregon, working at a small repair shop, fishing on weekends, living alone. No big family. No other kids. You were it, he said. And I blew it. Maybe, I said. But maybe now we start from here. He smiled. And for the first time, I saw a flicker of peace in his face. Later that evening, Erin and I sat on the cabin porch, wrapped in a shared blanket, watching the stars blink awake. You okay? She asked. I think so, I said. It's like, something that was off balance inside me finally shifted back into place. Not fixed. But less broken. She rested her head on my shoulder. You did something a lot of people never get the chance to do. I didn't plan it. The best things rarely are. We were quiet for a while. Then she said, what happens when we go back? The question I'd been avoiding. I looked out into the woods. I don't want to disappear into that world again, I said. I want something different. Smaller. Real. Our cafe. I nodded. Yeah. But not just to keep me grounded. I want to build something that people can walk into and feel like they're home. The way you made me feel when I walked into that bar. She smiled. Then let's do it. Together. The next morning, I drove my father to the train station. We didn't say much, but the silence was no longer painful. It was full of possibility. Before he boarded, he turned to me. You've got something rare, son. Don't let money drown it out. I won't, I promised. He smiled, pulled me into a hug, the first since I was a teenager, and then he was gone. Back in the city, the noise hit like a wave. But I wasn't the same man who'd left. The day after we returned, Erin and I walked into a dusty corner property in a quiet neighborhood, a small shop with chipped paint and creaky floors. This is it, she whispered. I feel it. I nodded. Let's make it ours. As we stood in the middle of that empty space, I felt a sense of something I hadn't had even when I was at the height of my wealth. Belonging. But nothing worth having comes easy. That night, I received a call from a former board member of my company. I hear you're ignoring offers, he said. Big mistake. People are talking. Your value is peaking again, you could go 10 times higher if you act now. I'm not interested, I said. He chuckled coldly. Don't be naive. You're not a bartender. You're a mogul. You walk away now, you'll be irrelevant in 6 months. I'm okay with that. You sure? Because we have a buyout proposal you should see. High 8 figures. Possibly 9. I hung up without saying a word. I looked at Erin across the room. She was painting a vision board for the cafe, laughing at a crooked picture she'd cut out from a magazine. That was my future. Not some boardroom war. But I knew the fight wasn't over. The world I'd left behind wasn't going to let me go so easily. I thought I had closed the door. Thought I had walked away clean. But power never lets you go quietly. Not when you've tasted it, and especially not when others think they still have a claim on your name. The morning after I turned down the board member's call, I received a letter. Not an email. Not a text. A formal, hand-delivered letter in a cream envelope with embossed lettering. It read, "We believe you are making a critical error in judgment. The proposed acquisition of your brand and assets could net you over $100 million with long-term royalties and international licensing potential. We are prepared to meet in person to finalize terms. Consider this your final opportunity to secure your legacy. J.L. Marshall, Pinnacle Strategies Group." Legacy. They always used that word like a carrot. But to me now, legacy wasn't tied to skyscrapers or stock valuations. Legacy was a life well lived. Honest. Whole. Shared. Still, the number haunted me. $100 million. That kind of money changes lives. It shapes generations. And I had to admit, part of me was tempted. Erin noticed right away that something was off. We were at the property, scrubbing the front windows with buckets of vinegar and elbow grease. She was singing along to some classic soul tune playing off her phone when she caught me staring blankly at the glass. "All right," she said, putting the sponge down. "What happened?" I hesitated. Then pulled the letter from my jacket. She read it silently, her expression calm but unreadable. When she finally looked up, she didn't say what I expected. "Do you want to take it?" she asked. "No," I said too quickly. "That's not an answer," she replied gently. "That's a reflex." I sat on the dusty step by the front door. "I don't want to go back to that world," I said. "But I can't pretend that number doesn't shake me. I mean, Erin, $100 million. That's life insurance for 3 lifetimes. That's a foundation. A hospital wing. A future for our kids, if we ever have any." She sat beside me. "Then why does it feel like a threat and not a gift?" I looked at her. "Because I know what that money comes with. Expectations. Meetings. Endless decisions I won't own anymore. I'll be them again. Just in a nicer suit." She nodded. "So, then why are we still talking about it?" That night, I didn't sleep. I paced the apartment. Sat down. Stood up. Replayed the conversation 1,000 ways. Drafted responses I didn't send. I even looked up their office address in Manhattan. I thought about my father. About the hug at the train station. About his rough hands and tired eyes and the simplicity of his small-town life. I envied him in that moment. But the world I came from was like gravity. It didn't like being defied. And I had a gut feeling they weren't done. The next morning confirmed it. I arrived at the café to be and saw a man in a tailored suit standing by the front door. Slick hair. Bluetooth earpiece. Clipboard. He turned as I approached. "Mr. Langston." "Who's asking?" "David Kerr. I represent Pinnacle's real estate division. We understand this property is currently under informal agreement, but not yet under full ownership." He smiled, sharp and polite. "We're prepared to outbid any standing offer by 40%, cash." My blood ran cold. "They sent you here?" "They want to help you," he said. "Return to form. You're too valuable to waste on this." He gestured vaguely at the half-painted walls and old storefront window. "This," I said slowly, "is my life now. And I'm not selling it." He handed me a sleek black folder anyway. "In case you change your mind. You've got 7 days. After that, we move on, and you may not get another chance." He turned and left. I stood there for a long time before going inside. Erin was already working inside, sketching table layouts on a notepad. I dropped the folder on the counter with a quiet thud. "They're trying to buy the property." She looked up. Her face didn't change. "Are we surprised?" "No." "Are we scared?" I swallowed. "A little." She walked over and opened the folder. Diagrams. Projections. A bank check with my name pre-written. Zeros that looked like fiction. They don't just want your business, she said. They want to remind you that you were theirs. I sat down on an overturned milk crate. I didn't expect it to be this hard, I admitted. Letting go. She knelt in front of me. You're not letting go of money. You're letting go of a version of yourself that used to feel like the only way to matter. I felt a tear roll down, uninvited. What if I still don't know who I am without it? She smiled. Then let's find out. Together. The next few days were a blur of choices. We finalized the purchase paperwork with a small, local lender. I called in a few favors, not corporate ones, but from real friends, quiet connections I'd kept alive without expecting anything in return. They came through. Volunteers helped us strip the old tile from the floor. A friend of Aaron's offered to refinish the wood bar counter. My father even mailed us a set of antique stools from his shop with a handwritten note, "Every story needs a place to begin." And yet, the deadline from Pinnacle loomed. Every night, the offer folder stared at me from the corner of the kitchen. I never opened it again. But I didn't throw it away either. Until day 7. On the morning of the deadline, Erin and I walked to a nearby bridge overlooking the river. She carried the folder. "You sure?" she asked. I nodded. She opened it. Pulled out the check. The contracts. The glossy photos of their vision for the property. Then, one by one, she tore them in half and let the pieces fly into the wind. I watched the remnants dance over the water, like paper birds set free. Later that day, as we hung the "coming soon" sign in the window, my phone rang. Unknown number. But I knew who it was. I answered. "You've made your point," said the familiar voice of J.L. Marshall. "Come. Cold. Corporate. But you're throwing away more than you realize." "I know exactly what I'm walking away from," I said. "And I know what I'm walking toward." Silence. "Then, this industry doesn't remember men like you when you vanish." "I'm not vanishing," I replied. "I'm finally showing up." And I hung up. That night, the power went out. Not a metaphor, the literal electricity. A fuse blew in the main circuit of the cafe. Erin and I sat by candlelight, surrounded by half-built shelves and boxes of coffee mugs. "Kind of perfect, isn't it?" she laughed. "I think I love this place more with the lights off," I said. She looked at me. "I think I love you more in the dark." I leaned in. "That's good. Because we're about to spend the next few years living like broke dreamers." She touched my face. "You never looked richer." But just when I thought the past was done chasing me. A knock came on the cafe door. Late. Strange. Erin and I looked at each other. I walked over, opened it cautiously. And standing there, soaking wet from the sudden rain, was my ex-fiancé. "Hi," she said softly. "Can we talk?" When I opened the cafe door that night, the past stepped in with wet shoes and smeared mascara. "Hi," she said again, quieter this time, as if the rain had softened her. I hadn't seen Natalie in almost a year, not since the day everything collapsed. We had been engaged. Power couple, press darlings, always polished. But when my assets froze, so did her warmth. She was gone within 2 days, leaving behind a note that said, "I can't do this. You've changed." And now here she was, standing in the soft candlelight of my half-finished dream, looking at me like she wasn't sure if I was real. "I didn't know where else to go," she said. I looked over my shoulder. Erin stood at the counter, watching, silent. I turned back to Natalie and stepped aside. "Come in." She walked slowly, glancing around the space. It smelled like fresh paint and lavender. There were still boxes everywhere, the floor half-sanded, tools scattered. It was messy, but alive. "This is yours?" she asked. "Ours," I said, nodding toward Erin. "We're opening in 3 weeks." She nodded, biting her lip. "I saw the articles. About how you refused the buyout. About this. I guess I didn't think it was real." I gave a half-smile. Most people don't until they see it. She stood in the middle of the cafe, spinning once like a ghost in someone else's dream. Then she looked at me. I came to say I'm sorry. The words hung in the air like delicate glass. Breakable. Long overdue. For what? I asked. For leaving when I should have stayed. For loving the life, not the man. She looked ashamed, and that was new. The Natalie I knew had always been polished, composed, untouchable. But the woman standing in front of me now looked raw. Human. I thought you were weak, she continued. When the company fell apart, I panicked. I told myself I couldn't be with someone who failed. But really, I was just terrified that without all the money, without the spotlight, we'd be nothing. I took a deep breath. And now, I see you, she whispered. Really see you. And I realize, you're stronger now than you ever were then. Her voice cracked. I made a mistake. I didn't respond right away. I looked at her. Then at Aaron. Then back at Natalie. You're right, I said. You did make a mistake. She flinched. Not visibly, but in that quiet, internal way people do when they finally hear the truth they've been avoiding. I loved you, I said, voice steady. Or at least I thought I did. We built a life made of shine and surface, and for a while, that felt like love. But when it all crumbled, the only thing left standing was the truth. I stepped closer. You didn't just leave me, Natalie. You left the version of me that couldn't serve you anymore. And maybe that's the best thing you ever did for me. Her eyes welled up. Because losing everything led me here, I continued, gesturing around the cafe. To something real. Something built with calloused hands and hope. And I don't need you to be sorry. I need you to let go. A tear slid down her cheek. I thought maybe we could. We can't, I said gently. Because I've already found what I was missing. I turned to Erin. She walked toward us, calm and confident, like she already knew what I would say. And maybe she did. I reached for her hand and held it. This is Erin. She believed in me when I had nothing. When all I had was a broken name and my last $100. Natalie nodded slowly. She looked at Erin, then back at me, and smiled, sad, but sincere. Then I'm glad you found her. She stepped back toward the door, pausing just before she left. I hope this place becomes everything you dreamed. It already is, I said. She gave one last look, not longing, not regret, but release. Then she was gone. Later that night, Erin and I sat on the floor, backs against the wall, sharing a bottle of cheap wine we'd been saving for the opening. Well, she said, raising her glass. To X's in the rain. I laughed. To new beginnings in borrowed buildings. We clinked glasses. She leaned her head on my shoulder. Did it hurt? She asked. Seeing her. I nodded. Yeah. But not for the reasons I expected. It didn't hurt because I missed her. It hurt because I finally understood what love wasn't. She smiled at that. And I realized something else. I think I needed that goodbye to really move forward. You think she did too? Probably. We sat in silence, listening to the hum of the city and the soft creak of the old beams above us. Then Erin whispered, "You never told me what you'd do if you got your last $100 back." I looked at her, smiling. I think I already did. The cafe opened 3 weeks later. Nothing fancy. No ribbon-cutting ceremony. Just us, some handwritten signs, and the smell of strong coffee and fresh scones. People trickled in, locals, curious passers-by, a few folks who recognized my face but didn't ask questions. Some came for the coffee. Some stayed for the conversations. By week 2, we had regulars. By month 2, we had a waiting list for Sunday brunch. It wasn't about success. It was about substance. We named the place The Last 100. Some people thought it was a joke. Some thought it was branding genius. But a few, the ones who'd lost something, fought for something, loved through something, they understood. One evening, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a folded check. $100. And a note. For the best investment you ever made. Dad. I framed it and hung it by the register. Customers asked about it all the time. And I'd smile and say, that's how it all started. One last 100. And one last chance. As the months passed, Erin and I grew the business, but we never let it become more important than the life we were building together. We closed on Sundays. We took walks by the lake. We fought sometimes, over furniture or finances or how much cinnamon belonged in the apple pie, but it was real. And it was ours. One night, sitting on the porch of the cabin we'd returned to for a weekend away, she looked at me with that quiet intensity I'd come to love. "Do you still miss that life?" she asked. I thought about it for a moment. "I miss the illusion sometimes," I said. The feeling that everything was under control. That success meant safety. But now I know better. Now I know that real wealth isn't in stocks or titles. It's in second chances. In forgiveness. In a good woman's hand in mine when everything else fades away. She kissed me. And I knew then, truly, finally, that I was rich in all the ways that mattered.